Welcome everybody. Welcome all to this Subject Overview and Scrutiny Committee 3 meeting, which is being held virtually with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council website to be viewed subsequently. Should I, as Chair, experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, Councillor Colin Davis will step in and take over temporarily as Chair in my absence. And in his absence, then Councillor Graham Walter will step in. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask the officers to present a brief summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch on their microphones at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all of the times you keep your microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting, as agreed in the recent full council meeting. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should click the raise hand icon at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I'll come to you in the order I receive requests. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphones until I invited you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout this duration, and when necessary will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones are switched off when not in use. We'll now proceed to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor William Kendall, and Councillor Ian Williams will be leaving the meeting at 5:30 today.
Lovely. I have Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'll need to leave at around about 5 to 6 for a Bridgend Town Council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Graham Walter.
Thanks, Chair. Likewise, I need to leave the meeting at 6 to attend another meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Spanswick.
Chair, my apologies. My camera's not working. I just trying, it's just won't come on.
Don't worry.
I was looking this morning, but it's now failing, so my apologies. I do, but no camera.
Okay. That's the reason that's your hands up for, John, is it? To let us know, is it? Okay. There's no more hands up. I will now move on to item 2, declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please click on the right hand icon and I will come to you in turn for you to declare your interest. Councillor Jonathan Pratt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not so much a declaration of interest, but look, much like at full council last week, as this is remote, my daughter is expected to be home at 5 o'clock. So with your permission, Chair, if I turn my camera off, it's because my daughter wants to say hello to everyone. So if you don't mind, Chair, hopefully it doesn't happen.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, again, is it, or Legacy?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I notice on agenda item, sorry, I'm working on 2 screens, I do apologise.
Yeah,
on item 6, in relation to the Q3 performance, there are aspects in that report which relate to the housing sector and homelessness and the private rented sector. I don't know where the conversation's going to go towards, but if it does go towards the PRS, then I need to declare that I'm in full paid employment from the National Residential Landlords Association and would need to carefully decide whether I need to leave the meeting at that point or not. But I'll see where the conversation goes, Chair.
No problem. Thank you. I don't see any further hands. I'm going to move on to item 3, approval of the minutes. Please can I have a mover and seconder for the minutes of the 25th of September 2023? Anybody?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Could I have a move on a seconder for the minutes from the 19th of March 2024, please?
I'll move.
Thank you. Seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you. On the extraordinary meeting held on the 26th of March 2024.
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder, anybody?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, I mean, sorry, apologies.
Okay, Chair. I was Jonathan, Councillor Pratt actually seconded.
Okay. No
I was
problem.
miming.
Thank you. I'll move on swiftly on then to item 4, the Kyra heat scheme, please. I will now ask officers to briefly introduce the report. I will then call up members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in turn. Okay, thank you. Are we going to call in the officer? Or Janina, she is, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If you're happy, I'll just give a very quick introduction to the report this afternoon. So thank you very much, Scrutiny, for inviting us along to the session. My name is Janine Nightingale, Corporate Director of Communities for the recording. I'm also joined by a couple of my officers, Scrutiny. I'm joined by Ian Sherwood and Paul Smith, and we also have Alistair Wilcox with us today, and he's from Maple Cone, and they are the company that have done some of the evaluation of this project for us. So we are all here to answer any queries that you have when we get to the end of this report. So what I will do, Chair, if you don't mind, is just give a very short introduction, and then I might hand over to Alistair to see whether there's anything that he would like to add, and then we can go to any questions. Chair, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, thank you. Carry on.
So, Scrutiny, the Kyra Heat Scheme was a highly innovative project. It started back in 2016, and it really was a first for the UK. This hadn't been done before. It was to look at demonstrating, if we could, the use of heat from water that was within flooded former coal mine workings, and to see whether we could use that heat to provide a resource for properties in Kyra. So using that heat and then a heat pump to provide a district heat network. Why was Kyra chosen for us in Bridgend? Well, because it's an area that's got a high area of fuel poverty. And also because of the predominance of mine working. There was quite a lot of work done back in 2016 to identify which area would be best. So this project was primarily funded by Welsh Government and the European Union funding from WEFO. It cost circa 3 million we spent when we finished the project. And of this, only 10% was matched funded by BCBC. And actually, we match funded it by staff that were involved in the project, as opposed to a match with cost. So we matched with staff. I think we paid about 65,000 in revenue. So the majority of this project was funded for us. Now, unfortunately, despite our best efforts, and I say this because when I joined back in 2020, we'd already been working on this for a number of years, and we were looking at energy efficiency and ways to decrease fuel poverty for some time up in Kyra. So we spent another 2 or 3 years working on this project. But despite all our efforts to make this work, and it was a demonstrator project, we did have some real difficulties with land assembly in areas in Kyra, and also delivering what had to be at the time a commercially viable project. Now, there were a number of things as a result of that, not least this project had to break even, of course, but also one of the things that was incredibly difficult for us was that the Welsh Government were insistent that we paid business rates for this scheme. And that was incredibly difficult to afford, as well as other things. So it just meant that the financial model, just didn't break even. So we spoke to our colleagues at WEFO and we decided that the project had to cease at that point. It doesn't mean we will never look at mine water again in Caira, but it just means at that point in time we weren't able to take the project any further forward. So section 3.1 of the report sets out in detail all the work that we've done, and what we've put together is we didn't want to finish the project and not have any outcome. So what we've agreed with the funders was to have what we call a mine water heat toolkit. And it takes all of the very, very detailed learning over those years and puts them together. So other local authorities, for instance, up in the north of England, etc., where they have mine water there in old coal mines, they can look to use these to see whether a project would be suitable in their areas. So section 3.1 of the report sets out this toolkit that we've put together and which has gone live for other local authorities to use. And a small number of local authorities have started accessing it actually, and have started conversing with us about what should they do if they wanted to progress a project. Excuse me. And then what we also wanted to do to make sure that we got this right was to have an independent evaluation of the project to ensure that we'd gone down every avenue and that the toolkit that we prepared showed all the lessons that we'd learned. And that is set out in section 3.2 of the report. And that is where Alistair is with us today. Scrutiny, should you wish to probe him further on that. But what we wanted to do was before, this is probably the last time we'll ever bring this project into a public forum like this. So we wanted to give you an opportunity, because I know a lot of you, if you're new members from the last administration, wouldn't have had an opportunity to see a report such as this or have the opportunity to question this project. So it has now closed, but we wanted you to have this opportunity today and then to see whether you can make any recommendations for us, if you feel there are some, when we start to look at these innovative projects in the future, if we ever do. What I will say is that when this project started back in 2016, we were in a very different place financially, and this project was fully funded. I'm not sure there is monies to this magnitude available now to go for innovative projects like this going forward. Whether we'll get the chance to do that again, I don't know. But if you have any recommendations you could come forward with, we would gratefully receive them. What we intend to do today is to give you an honest and open account of what happened with that project. We'll answer questions here today about the Caira mine water. No problem at all. So before I hand over back to you, Chair, I wonder whether Alistair thinks that there's anything that he could contribute at this point, or whether maybe it's better to leave Alistair to answer questions. Alistair, are you there, please?
Yes, indeed, Janine, I'm here. Thank you.
There.
Yes.
Is there anything you'd like to contribute at this point?
At this particular moment, I don't think so. No, I think you've summarised that very well. So I'll leave it to questions if that's okay with you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So we'll pass back to you then, Chair, to see if there's any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Thanks for the report. Thank you very much. First councillor indicating is Councillor Philip Jenkins, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Director. Good afternoon, all. I'm just looking, you mentioned, obviously, this is a posthumous type of scheme we're looking at now on how it came about, etc. But I'm looking back, obviously, on the records over the weekend. The government, the Welsh government, back under Leslie Griffiths, then was awarded under the heading of the Caira scheme, I think it's £6.5 million and a total of £9.4 million. I appreciate, as you said, now we are in a totally different financial market as we were those years ago. Could you tell me, what happened to the rest of that money, or where is it, or was it a Wales-wide? Because the report that I read mentions particularly the Caira water extraction scheme, and that mentioned actually £6.5 million of funding for that, with a total of 9.4. I'm also concerned that although we've only spent in both officer time and staff time and direct contribution, nearly £400,000. Given that scheme, I, being a layperson, over the weekend, I found out 90% of what was in this small report. I gather it's a small report, and I would imagine it's in much more detail with the officers. So I will concede to that. But you know what I mean? Even back then, one would have thought it was an initiative, as you said. And even today, the Ordnance Survey people, along with the British Coal and the Coal Mining Authority, rather, said it is a proven technology at the moment. But I would have thought that perhaps the groundwork and our contribution before entering into something like this should have been done beforehand, because, you know, back then, as you said, it was financially different schemes, or we were in a financially different climate. But even that should have allowed us to made a decision back then, as I was not present, obviously, in the authority there, to either think whether these schemes are feasible or not. And going forward, if we were to go forward in the future, because there is merit in it, as you say, of course there's merit in it, and to look at the other schemes that are operating throughout England and Wales, with the estimated Coal Authority and Ordnance Survey saying 6 million homes can benefit now from this type of heat scheme, as it is, and over 300,000 businesses and offices are situated directly in and around and over disused mines that have the water. So I think there will come a time where we will look at it again. But my question really is, how much of the money was there altogether? Was it 9.4 million and 6.5 million allocated to Caira? If so, we're only showing a total of just over £200 million being spent on it.
Janine?
So,
yeah, there was a larger amount, Councillor Jenkins. Can I just correct you here, though? We spent 2.9 million, not 200 million, as you just said.
My apologies. Yeah.
No, don't worry. But just in case you're quoted, we'll correct
I apologise for that. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so 2.9 million. This was a demonstrator project. So at the outset, there were many questions unanswered. For instance, where would we find the water? We had geological surveys, we had the Coal Authority working with us, we had Cardiff University working with us. And at one point, we had to do a borehole 200 metres into the ground to get to the water. So we spent now, because nobody from the outset would be able to say whether this was financially feasible or not. And that's why this was a demonstrator project, to try and demonstrate that it was, because nobody knew how far you'd have to bore down, what water would be there, and whether it was feasible to extract it. That was what the whole idea of this project was. So that's why it was funded to that degree, but we only spent 2.9, and then we decided when we had that information available to us, and not all of that was on the mine water. I'm going to bring Paul in shortly to give you a breakdown of some of that spend was for some other things within properties in Caira. So what was important is that once we knew that the scheme could not be financially viable, it was better that we stopped at that point. Now, that's not to say moving forward we can't revisit this, because at the time prices of gas and electricity were quite low, and the cost of the mine water was higher than the cost of gas and electricity for instance, in the primary school. So at one point, the primary school were reticent to swap to groundwater because it would cost them more, even though it was a sustainable form of heating. That may be very different now. And we also had situations where our colleagues at Welsh Government wanted to levy business rates on the scheme, and the cost of that made the scheme very unaffordable, and other elements. Now, in England, things like hydro schemes, hydro water schemes, don't pay business rates, because some of these schemes are such that they don't generate enough profit to be able to pay a business rate. So what we tried to do was lobby our colleagues in Welsh Government to say to them, look, this is an innovative scheme, you know, to get us away. Is there a possibility to have an exemption? And it wasn't, I'm afraid, at that point in time. Now, should that policy change, and should we get to that position in the future, and should the prices of gas and electricity stabilise, should the technology become cheaper to implement, then we might be able to revisit this and it might be able to break even. What we couldn't do as a local authority was to subsidise this going forward. That wouldn't be right. It had to at least wash his face going forward. And to be fair, it was, unfortunately, you know, there was all of that money to spend to implement it. We did have that money, that grant money there to implement it. Now, the staff salaries that we match funded, we were paying those staff anyway, Councillor Jenkins. So those staff were doing environmental schemes. It wasn't that we had to spend 400,000. Those staff worked on this project and we were allowed to match. You not always are allowed to match, but in this occurrence, we were allowed to match fund staff to that grant. But I don't know whether that gives you some assurances there, because it was a very short report. We have done previous cabinet reports, which have got a bit more detail in. But if I can bring in Paul Smith, maybe Paul can answer or provide a little bit more detail on some of the spend and the finances and the grants, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul, please.
Okay, thank you. I guess the first point to make is that the two pieces of information that are important.
Paul, could you introduce yourself first, please?
Very sorry, Chair. I'm Paul Smith. I'm the Decarbonisation Programme Manager at Bridgend Council. And I will caveat this with saying that this project is before my time. I've only been at the council for a couple of years, but I've kind of led the delivery of the toolkit element of this project, kind of post the decision to not go ahead with a capital build. So just to pick up where I left off then, the two key pieces of information with this sort of project are understanding the amount of heat that is available from the resource, so the flooded mines in this case, and also the level of demand that you'd have from your customers. That would be the homes in Cairo and the businesses and the school. So as Janine said, there was a borehole sunk, which isn't it's not a cheap activity to undertake. So I'm not sure the exact cost off the top of my head, but it's probably approaching 10%, if not more, of that ERDF grant sum that's there. The other part of that then is understanding the demand within Cairo. So the majority of that Welsh Government grant was around surveying homes in Cairo to understand the energy demand, and also then levering in some energy company obligation funding to improve the energy efficiency, replace boilers, that kind of thing in a significant number of homes in Cairo. So those are two quite large items of spend. Then there was also quite a lot of consultancy work, so looking at bringing in a private wire connection from a nearby wind farm. So there's quite a lot of technical and electrical engineering activity around that, and that was actually proven to be a really good way of reducing the running costs for the project, and that's applicable to anywhere else that's able to connect directly into a wind farm. I think that's probably it, Janine. Is that?
Could I just come back, Chair, then on that?
Yeah, we've got a few people waiting on me, so make it quick, right, please.
I appreciate that, and I thank the officer, Mr. Smith, there for that report, and the director, obviously. But I'm confused now, and who had the £9.4 million published by Leslie Griffiths, and the Welsh Government in the report that specifically said it is directed at the Cairo scheme. Perhaps I need to address that then with my assembly member, or as they call themselves now, the government member. But I'm confused, although we've only spent probably this, or the total of the scheme published, given to us is the 3 million, is it odd? And or £3 million roughly.
Phil, I'll ask Janine that direct question then, is it?
Did we have that 9 million or
Yeah,
6.5 million?
What happened
Yeah,
to
we
it? Janine,
we
can you
were
address that?
Yeah, I do believe we were awarded up to 9 million. We were, but you have to put in a grant claim, Councillor Jenkins, as and when you get to the point where you have a spend. So we got to the point where we spent 2.9 million. We couldn't make the scheme financially viable, so that's when it stopped. So the rest of the money stayed with ERDF or was allocated to other schemes. So we didn't draw down any money, because you have to draw it down as and when you progress. So because we couldn't make sure it break even, and what we can't have is the council subsidising that, we made a decision, and I have to tell you, it's with a heavy heart we made a decision, because we've been at this for some time. We did have the money to implement it, but at that point it was considered that the annual cost of running that heat network was too high. So we had to unfortunately stop at that point.
Okay,
So
thank you.
You've answered that adequately then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor
My
Jenkins.
pleasure.
Thank you. Councillor Martin Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. The question really goes back into I've got two questions. Is really exactly what was the money spent on? Now we hear that about £100,000 was spent on a borehole, but that's a very small percentage of the 3 million. And then it was referenced that most, I think the phrase was, most of the Welsh Government funding was spent on determining the energy demand of houses in Cairo. Well, that's 1.4 million. Now, that's an awful lot of money, and I can't reconcile that. I mean, you would survey a few houses and then you'd extrapolate that. So and presumably there's smart meters and what have you anyway. So the information is available from other sources. You know, the energy partners will know what sort of energy use a typical Cairo house will have. So I'm really struggling to see, given that all we've got at the end of it is a report, I'm really struggling to see where the £3 million was actually spent, and £100,000 on a borehole and maybe 1.4 million on surveys doesn't cut it. I'd like to see understand more detail of where it all is. I've got a second question as well, but I'd like that answered first, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Councillor Williams, I think what we must realise here is this was occurring over 6 years, and we were working with consultants on feasibility, working with the coal authority, working on the site. This was expenditure. Now, every single claim on that grant we had to submit a claim to the funder. So there is a very, very detailed audit trail of where the money was spent and was it necessary to undertake the project. So I'm not able to answer that in detail today, and I don't think it's right we do either. But what I can do is, if you do want to see where the detail of that is, what I can ask is that the team go back and look at those replies to the funders of when they drew down the monies and the grants over that 6-year period, and we can give you probably a high-level summary of what it was spent on. Because of course we couldn't claim the drawdown on the money unless it was legitimate to be spent on that scheme. So hopefully that will help there to satisfy your curiosity there.
You happy with that, Martin? If we get a written report on the amount where it was spent?
Well, I mean, I'm content to have a written report, Chair, but given that we're talking about £3 million with very little to show for it, I'm surprised that we haven't got more detail come to this committee. My second question, if I could, Chair, before I give way to others, is there was talk about that this scheme was unviable for 2 reasons that I picked up. One was that business rates made it unviable, which I presume would have been known early on. That would have been known early on. And secondly, that the borehole, after the borehole was done, that it was considered that it was unviable as a result of that. So again, we're only £100,000 in. So those things, you'd think you'd do the borehole quite early on and you'd know about the business rates early on. So why did we spend 3 million before we realised it was unviable when we could have known this stuff at a much earlier stage? That's something else I don't really understand.
Janine, can I come in quickly there? Councillor Williams said that the borehole was unviable. Did you actually say that, or is that actually been? No,
No, the borehole, the results wasn't it said that after the result of the borehole said that the water wasn't right, or that it was too deep, or there was something.
Initial reports coming out at the time, because obviously being the kind of member, Councillor Williams, was that it was 18 degrees of water and all this. So I don't remember that being an issue. But sorry, Janine answering, right? I shouldn't be
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a demonstrator project that was agreed, and the business case was agreed by WEFO, the European Funding Office. So when you have a demonstrator project, there's two things that can happen, as you well aware. It can succeed or it can fail, and that's what a demonstrator project is about. Trying to demonstrate the concept of using mine water. Now, boreholes weren't driven on that site or drilled into the ground for a couple of years, because we had to do all of the work with the coal authority, get the permissions, see which coal seam was the most viable, or the geotech work had to be done for some time. And then when we put the borehole in, the borehole was feasible, but what was very clear is the cost of that mine water scheme, annual revenue cost, was higher than the income we could derive from it. And it was only as we went through the process did that become clear. And at the point that became clear, that was when we had a conversation with the colleagues from WEFO, Welsh Government, etc., to say, at this stage in the economy, in the climate, it is financially unviable. It wasn't prudent to go any further with that scheme and to start to use that water for heat. Now, from our conversation with our colleagues at WEFO, we had spent the grant and we claimed it in a timely way. And what they've said is that all of the information that we have learnt, all of those lessons we've learned, is valuable information. Councillor Williams, if you go onto the toolkit itself, you will see the detailed analysis and work that has been undertaken as part of this project that will now be used and is being used by local authorities in other parts of the UK to look at whether schemes are viable for them, including geology, hydrology, commercial modelling, licenses and permits, because that was important, all of the borehole and drilling itself. We learned an awful lot about that, what depth you need to go. We looked at project management and governance, procurement, and our colleague who's here with us today can probably give you more detail, Alistair, about what was done there, because one of the things that he was asked to do was to look at the lessons learned from this project. So whilst I realise that you don't think that money spent was worthwhile, and that's what I'm getting from you, the funders were content with the amount of money. We spent 1/3 of the allocated funding getting to that point and preparing this toolkit for other people. We didn't go any further once we knew that the revenue wouldn't work out for this authority. So at this stage, it was an innovative project, the first in the UK, and for us in BCBC, I'm afraid it doesn't work out financially. Now, other authorities in other parts of the UK may be prepared to subsidise this, or maybe the government, the UK government, will subsidise the cost of this in other parts of the UK. But at that stage, at that time, we couldn't proceed with a revenue liability for the council, and we've made the right decision here. However, everything we've learned over that period that we were doing this project is now captured for other people to use, and the funders are content with that. They're not asking for any repayment of any grant. They are content with the outcomes from this demonstrator project. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just correct something? I don't have a view on this. I mean, the role of committee is, it's not my view at the moment whether it's worthwhile or not. Our role is to ask questions, and at the end we'll conclude whether we feel it was worthwhile or not. So I just like to correct that. Don't have a view at this point. I ask the questions to test the report in front of us.
Oh, my mistake then. My mistake, Chair, because I thought you were expressing a view that we'd spent the money.
Martin is ambivalent at this juncture, I think is fair to say. Janine, you don't want to bring Alistair in at this moment, then, Janine, do you know? Did Alistair, do you want to bring Alistair in, did you say, or?
Alistair, is there anything you can add at this point, do you think?
Yes, sorry, I do apologise. My camera doesn't seem to be working. I seem to be a grey square, so I do
Well,
apologise.
we can
for
see
that.
you, Alistair.
You can
so
see
just
me. Okay, it's
we
just
can
that
see
I
you
can't
fine.
see
Yeah,
myself.
carry on. Yeah. Don't make any rude gestures, for God's sake.
No, I won't. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to add on to what Janine was saying, which was that the toolkit that has resulted from this fits very nicely amongst a number of other toolkits that are available through other organisations, for example, the Energy Systems Catapult that I work with as well, which includes a whole sector, a very large set of information about public sector decarbonisation and the like. So there's some very good toolkits out there, and this particular toolkit is the first and only one that I'm aware of that covers mine water heat. So it has really provided a hugely valuable set of information, and that is directly based upon the experiences that have been had from this particular project, which have, while over a significant period of time, have certainly the various phases that this project has gone through, and let's be straightforward about it. The attempts that have been made to make it a viable project financially have certainly provided some really useful lessons learned, and they're all to the good for, as Janine has suggested, other organisations that may well be able to move a project like this forward in different circumstances.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you very much. Councillor Jonathan Pratt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's the same that one of the reasons is that the Welsh Government wanted business rates. But there we are. They wanted their pound of flesh, but they weren't getting it. But never mind. I'm looking at the Nordic Energy Mine Water Potential Interactive Map. Now, did this come before or after the conclusion of this report? Because looking at it, and I'm cautious that I'm staring at something that I don't fully understand, but it looks like Cairo seems to have a lot of improbable mine water potential, whereas if you go over to Blaengarrow, Nanty Moyle, it's a lot more orange. It's a simple question, I suppose, probably with a complex answer. Did we pick the wrong area of the county borough? Did we know that before, or do we know it now, if that makes sense?
I'm going to jump in here quick, Chair. I'm going to offer a quick answer because I seem to remember a similar question coming up during the scheme itself on this. And the reason they used Cairo was because the access to the actual, above the actual shafts was so good. Now, there may be more water up in Blaengarrow, but getting over the drill site and to get down into the is maybe more difficult. But I let the expert answer that. Janine, or do you want to bring Alistair back in?
I think I'm either going to. I think Paul is probably the best person to answer this, Chair.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, so that interactive tool you're looking at, that was developed as part of the toolkits. That was something that was funded, and yeah, Councillor Davis is quite right. The orange colours you see in there is purely an assessment of the underground water quality. It doesn't make any assessment as to how accessible that might be, which does factor into it as well. So the idea behind that tool is to use it exactly as you've done there. Is it's a ready reckoner. You can zone in on the bright orange areas. Then you can get some kind of idea about how suitable the housing stock would be for district heating. So you need to have pretty efficient fabric on a house for it to connect to a district heat network. So the better the ratings on that tool, the more likely it is that you can retrofit a district heat connection without any further energy efficiency work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Pratt. We want Councillor Ian Williams, please, next.
Thank you, Chair. I think Jonathan's stolen my thunder because my question is virtually along the same lines. I was just going to ask, really, what sets Cairo apart from the other two valleys in the borough?
Paul didn't actually quite cover that. Paul, is it because of the openness of that site, or is it is that because the reason?
Because from my point of view, we have deprived areas in all three valleys.
We have, yeah.
So, yeah, and I would have thought after the debacle of the 2012 Arbed insulation scheme, we would have stayed well clear of Caira with any more pilot schemes regarding insulation or any other form of heat-saving schemes.
Okay. Well, let's ask Paul what the actual question was. Paul, is the accessibility, is that the reason Caira was chosen or not? Or...
I'm afraid I don't know. It's long before my time.
All right, sorry.
There were at least 2 studies done before there was a submission to WEFO. I think it was before the submission around heat master planning, which looked at the whole county borough and unidentified areas. And one of those was undertaken by Hitachi. I think Cardiff University did another. I'll stand corrected there. So there was, it wasn't picked just because it was Caira, and, you know, looking at levels of deprivation or whatever the measure there might have been, there was quite a lot of work that went into identifying that particular area. And I dare say accessibility was one of the main factors.
Okay, thank you.
As a point of note, Chair, my grandfather sunk the pits at St John's, just so you're aware.
Very interesting. Thanks
I
for
thought
letting us
I'd
know
put that in there.
Yeah. Okay, I'm thinking of a chest at myself now to come up with. I'll come back on that one. Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, please.
Not sure if that was a declaration of interest or not there,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you know, we'll move on. Thank you, Chair. And I do really enjoy these sessions because it does give us the opportunity to get under the skin of some things. And I want to, if possible, just briefly go back to the business rates, the issue, just purely because 2 points of clarity I'm asking. One, when a business owner takes ownership of an empty premises, until they start operating, then they're still liable for the business rates, even if they're not operating. So have we paid business rates on this in the past because we were the tenant, or whatever we were, the legal occupier of the land? So have we paid any business rates to now? And a case was made for the exemption from business rates, given the potential opportunity this could go. Was the business model workable if we didn't have to pay business rates? So have Welsh Government here cut their nose off to spite their face by demanding business rates, hence stopping something that could have been a benefit to the community actually going forward? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I answer that?
Yes, certainly.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we undertook an awful lot of communication with Welsh Government over the business rates piece. We hadn't paid business rates on the land before, but it was going to be paid because, in essence, we were creating a heat network. So it was a commercial network because it was tantamount to an energy company, I suppose, even though it was owned by BCBC. So business rates would have been due on that once it started operating. And when you then take the cost of that business rate, spreads it over the financial model, what it did was took the annual cost of that way above the income that would come in. So at that point, it made it unviable when you modelled in the business rates. Now, that wasn't the only thing that we had some concern with. It wasn't just the business rates. There were concerns with getting land together and other things, land assembly. But it was just one of a basket of things that made this scheme very difficult. The other thing, Councillor Bledsoe, was that the time frame for operating this, we were grant funded until a certain cut-off date. And at one point it was getting very, very tight to that date to get that scheme drilled and in operation. Now, what would have happened is we may have been in the unfortunate position where the grant stopped and the work would have to continue past that date, in which case BCBC would have had to funded the completion of the work. So there were a number of things, but not least the business rates, when it was modelled over 20 years, was tantamount to a couple of £1 million. So what it did do,
So to be clear, we didn't actually pay any business rates, and it
No,
never
no,
got to
no,
that
because
point. Is that right?
we never built out the scheme.
And
So we
what was the
didn't pay any
second
business
question?
rates.
What was your second question again, Councillor Bledsoe? Was it answered? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it has been
It has
answered,
been,
and
yeah,
and
okay.
it's extremely frustrating because I think
Very.
everybody on here is a community councillor. We all own buildings. We all have to pay business rates on stuff that could be
Yeah.
serving the community.
That's right,
And to
yeah.
me, what I'm hearing is we took part in something that's cost the taxpayer £3 million, which in part has not become viable because Welsh Government want their pound of flesh on business rates. And this could have been great use to a great many people and could have helped with our carbon neutrality and everything going forward. And it just seems that left hand, right hand,
Yeah,
and I'm not referring to us.
No,
It's
just for the record, Councillor Bledsoe, yeah, you were in the pre-meeting, I think, was you? I supported the scheme when it was, when it was opposition up here to it, mind, like there always is, isn't there, to everything. I think it's a great loss to Kyla. It wasn't successful, but there's lots of people up here who would argue the opposite, but what can you say? That's
yeah. I mean, my point, Chair, was just on the fact that we need joined up thinking. If something has become unviable because it's millions of pounds in business rates, then that's counterproductive. So
yeah,
thank you,
I
Janine,
agree.
for the answer, and thank you, Chair.
I agree. Councillor Colin Davis, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to trump Councillor Williams and say,
look out.
My grandfather worked down our pit, so when I first heard about the scheme, it was really pleasing. And in terms of Kyra, in terms of the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation, as you say, Councillor Williams, all the valleys are struggling, but I think one of the Kyra wards at least is still in the bottom 10%. So there's a sad loss on that basis. I take everybody's points. Council Park, the map is fantastic. The interactive map is fantastic. If you're a bit of a train spotter when it comes to maps, I'd advise anybody to go and have a look at that. And I agree with the points made about the Welsh Government's short-sighted attitude towards the business rates. Applying something evenly is sometimes counterproductive, isn't it? In terms of the actual issues around previous reports and scrutiny and audits, I've been in a role whereby I had to produce reports for the Welsh Government, who then passed them on to WEFO, and they do expect a huge level of scrutiny, down to the last penny. So I'm sure the council fulfilled all those obligations, and if the council doesn't have records, then the Welsh European Funding Office will have those records. My point is, I'm moving forward because this is a report for noting. It's great to see the plan. I know people think it's a lot of money for just a plan, but hopefully this will benefit this, because at the end of the day, this is a research and development project, and some of them hit and some of them miss, and for different reasons. Not a lack of effort by the sound of it, because it went on over 6 years. To be fair, this one didn't work. But as Janine said, that's not to say that at some point in the future, economic circumstances dictate that this could actually become more viable. But hopefully in other parts of the country, they will learn from the lessons outlined in the report, and somebody will take it on. So my question is really about that issue. So we've got a reasonable kind of publicity proposal around how we make sure these lessons are not just learned, but available to those people thinking of considering that in the future. So has the team given any more consideration to how they could develop this publicity plan in a bit more detail, whether it's like on an annual basis, you send out a publicity shot, or you contact those organisations that may still be involved. I'm thinking of British Coal in particular, may still be involved in these kind of things. But the bottom line is that, more and more we have to take part in these research and development projects on this kind of technology, because we don't have much choice, and the clock is ticking on, us finding more economic solutions. So that's really my question. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Janine?
Yeah, I'll come in and start, and I might bring Alistair in if I may, Chair, because he's done a bit of work on that for us. Yes, I mean, when I didn't join the authority till 2000, and obviously this project was on at that time, but we you know, we were thrilled because we have a legacy, don't we, of a coal mining industry in South Wales. And if we thought we could use those mines, and also the Coal Authority felt the same, if they could use that landscape for some real benefit for sustainability, then we should, and we should try everything we could. Now, you know, so that's why the grant was funded, and we did that piece of work. And I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Davis. You know, there will be, I'm quite sure in the future, more opportunities to use this water, because we have to be self-sufficient, don't we, and stop using fossil fuels moving on. But the one thing that we did ask Alistair to do was to look at the toolkit and to come up with his view, to audit it and see was there any more we could do, because we've got all this fantastic learning, and you're right, we should be sharing it with other local authorities and other organisations. So I'm going to bring Alistair in, because in section 3.2 of this report, it does cover some of those things that you did suggest about reviewing and speaking to people. So, Chair, may I bring Alistair in?
Yeah, certainly. Alistair, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Thank you, Chair. There was considerable dissemination of the information already took place by Nordic Energy, who were the main authors of the report. So that was a useful exercise, as I understand it. And then, but the thing that I think would be really useful would be to see if it was possible in some way to continue to build on this report, keeping it up to date, keeping it as a really useful resource for organisations, other local authorities, and people like that to go to. And equally, it could become a resource that could be built on by other organisations as well. So, you know, if Newcastle Authority or somebody like that did some work on mine water heat, then that could be documented, and the lessons learned added into this, almost like a library of information and shared learning that could then become a very useful repository for anybody wanting to develop mine water heat within the UK. So those would be my thoughts on that. Particularly, obviously, that doesn't come with zero cost. So there would need to be either a small amount of investment made by local authorities generally, not necessarily Bridgend, but also there may be grant funding available from technology transfer or some other government offices who might be able to support some work of that nature.
Okay, thank you. You are content with that, Councillor Davis? Yeah.
I am. Just one last point in terms of lessons learned. I think on Alistair's last point there about the finances involved, I think we should perhaps make a bit more about the issue of the business rates. And I think we should involve the Welsh Government in that as well, because, as I said, moving forward in terms of these research and development projects about renewable energies, there has to be a different way of looking at these projects and that kind of energy, because otherwise, you know, it's going to be a barrier, and we can't afford any more barriers. So I'd just like to see a bit more emphasis on things like that in the report. I know that might be seen as controversial and confrontational, but as some of the other speakers have already said, we think it's quite important. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Martin Williams next, please.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of making it out like I've got a view on this already, I mean, I'm disappointed because I really like this sort of stuff. It's innovative, and we should be trying to do clever things. And I like being part of an organisation that does clever things. But I can't help going back to the fact that, you know, some of your residents, Chair, or other residents will say you've spent £3 million and you haven't got anything other than a report which you're going to give away to other people. So, you know, what are we as an organisation going to really learn from this about how we manage R&D projects or this sort of thing? Because, all right, it's all very well saying that, you know, 80% or 90% was funded elsewhere, but it's still getting on £400,000 worth of our money. Now, whether it's staff resource or actual pounds, shillings and pence, it's still our resource that was used there. And I'm concerned that residents looking in at this, given, you know, the council tax rise and all the rest that we're doing, will just say, well, look, you've spent £3 million, you've got nothing for it. So I would like to see, you know, for example, did we have any IP? Do we own any intellectual property that we can monetize to get some of our investment back? I suspect not. So I mean, I would like to see some more assurance, actually, some financial assurance, and whether internal audit want to have a look to see what we've done, and maybe they could advise us to how we manage R&D or innovative schemes going forward, because you know, this wasn't sold as an R&D project, really, was it? When we had the press about this, it was great fanfare, and how, you know, how houses in Cairo are going to be powered by the legacy mines beneath them, and I just think we need to be far more shrewd, and we need to learn real lessons, and that, if that takes an audit, then I would welcome that.
Was there a question there, Councillor Williams? Did I miss it, right? Or...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, in amongst there, it was how do we ensure that we not just learn the lessons of mine water, but how do we ensure that we really learn the lessons of how we manage innovative or R&D or speculative projects, because we don't seem to have a good record of it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Janine, I missed it. It was my fault. I shouldn't have interrupted again. Go on.
Well, Chair, that does seem like an opinion to me from Councillor Martin Williams. He's saying we don't have a good track record of managing innovative schemes. Now, that does seem, correct me if I'm wrong, but a bit of an opinion there. So what I would say here is, if you look at what was the match fund from Bridgend, the match fund was in staff, not revenue. We match fund our 10% in staff, and those staff were working in those areas anyway. The remainder of the money was from Welsh Government and from WEFO, European funding. And when we were claiming those grants, we were putting in detailed claim forms to get those grants, and they were perfectly comfortable with the grant forms we were claiming, and they were audited as such by the funders at the time. They wouldn't have released that money, Councillor Williams, had it not been prudent to do so. And we are talking about a time from 2016 onwards is when we spent this money over a number of years. It was a demonstrator project, and a demonstrator project by its very name is that you may succeed, or if you demonstrate the project is not financially viable, then you know when to stop. And that's what I think the lessons that we've learned here are many and multiple, and that's what's in the toolkit. We've learned that this is a fantastic technology, but at this moment in time, the financial climate in the market does not allow us to make it financially viable. So we had to stop. The money was there from the funders to continue to implement it, but then the annual revenue cost would have had to have been borne by this council, because it was that primary school in Cairo that would have had to have paid the revenue cost for the scheme. So what wasn't right and proper at that time was to have that revenue cost. So hopefully that makes sense, although I feel I have answered this question twice now, though.
Quickly, Councillor Williams also said earlier in his comments about intellectual property or lack of after the scheme. Is there any?
No, I don't believe there's any IP from here. This is it was boring down for mine water. Yeah. If you think about what we were doing, we were using mine water and putting it through a heat pump to extract energy. So that the heat pump isn't new technology. No, the new bit was getting the mine water up from the ground was the new bit. So I don't believe there is any IP here. I stand corrected if the team would tell me it's different. But as far as we've got to with this project, you know, it wasn't for the faint-hearted at the outset. And we were funded by WEFO and Welsh Government to do this. I have to admit, the team put their heart and soul into this, and it was a very, very tough day when we had to decide that it couldn't go forward, because I have to assure you, it wasn't through the lack of trying here to make this scheme work, because it would have really highly benefited those communities in fuel poverty, Chair. So I'll stop there.
Agreed, thank you. Councillor Jenkins, I'm going to bring in Councillor Spanswick here as a cabinet member, see if he's going to add to this conversation. Is that okay?
Yes, he can go before me. Yeah, he always does anyway.
Councillor Spanswick, please.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Thank you, Chair. My camera's still not working, but I just want to try and find a way forward, because Janine, the director, has explained more than once now. You know, this goes back to 8 years. I was there 8 years ago. And I can remember lots of discussion about this, about research and development, demonstrative project, call it what you like. I'm a bit disappointed with Councillor Martin Williams just searching for something that perhaps isn't there. I mean, what point is internal audit when we are WEFO with the all audit process, which has been explained about the claims? Okay, there is a lot of money, and there does need to be perhaps some questions asked from Welsh Government point of view, or to Welsh Government about the business rates element, and that's fair enough. But there seems to be a desperate scramble to find the problem somewhere. This is a learning project, an innovative project, a bold project, which BCBC, it's great that they tried it, and there's learning from it as part of the toolkit, and there'll be many parts of the country, I hope, will learn from it, but we might not know about that. They'll go onto the toolkit on the website, take bits off they need, and put that into some work they're doing. We might not even be contacted, so we don't really know the full extent of how well it will be used throughout the country, learning from our experiences. I think it's a shame, it's a pity it hasn't progressed, but as you said, Chair, for every person that wanted this to work in Caira, another one didn't want it to work. So we are where we are. Let's stop looking for problems that don't exist.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spanswick. Councillor Jenkins, your hand has disappeared. I don't know if I got Councillor Stephen Bledsoe next, please.
Is it me or Councillor Bledsoe?
Well, your hand has disappeared off the screen for some reason.
Oh, you put it down again, haven't you? Oh,
I haven't touched nothing, Philip. Don't.
Okay. Can I raise
I'm going to let Councillor Jenkins come in because his hands was up, and this have happened previous meetings when his hands have mysteriously disappeared.
Well,
so
I had a bit of cramp, I did, but
yeah. Well,
at the end of the day, I think that, in all fairness to the officers and us, but we're giving this body a good autopsy now at the moment, don't we, to a very large extent. And the economics of it are there speaking for themselves, isn't it? But just for us to note at the moment as well, the largest project in the UK, and this is where it's not our officers faltering, but devolved governments are not working together. And we have to look at different parts, and hopefully people can learn from this. But Gateshead, for instance, who were backed by the Coal Authority as a 6 megawatt heat pump source, servicing several hundred homes and public offices and libraries, etc. there. And they went live last year, in this. And so the next one to go live will be the CM Village in Durham project, etc. So it obviously has benefits, but for everybody to be aware, and I'm sure they are, at the end of the day, all the consultants on the pros and cons sides of all of this are saying the real only benefit to date of the heat water pump schemes is just to progress decarbonisation. And for that, it has to be economic. And therefore, I believe this council did make a right decision, given all the information they had in front of them. And it doesn't mean to say, as we all talk about revisiting it, etc. And many good questions obviously have been asked on the amount of money that is spent on it. But that has been done, and we're not progressing at the moment on it until it becomes really viable.
Yeah.
And so I'd like you to be aware, though, that our project's working, and if we can learn from them along with the Welsh Government to make it a viable position, then I would certainly have no objections. But the costs certainly outweigh the decarbonisation for the scheme anyway. So
okay,
thank you for giving me that time. Thank you.
No problem. I'm glad you've done a bit of research. I can't fault you, and especially with you successfully found out 2 other projects which are working. That's a good input. Councillor,
they're live, yes, yeah.
Yeah, live, yeah, good, yeah. Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, I kind of agree with where we are going with this, but this is a lessons learned report, and I think I did a little bit of a word search on the report and how many times lessons learned was mentioned and how many times challenges were mentioned. I do kind of share the concerns expressed by Martin Williams that this is £3 million worth of lessons learned, and we can divvy it up into different tables, but all other than Scottish Power, which is £65,000, is all public money from somewhere. It's a grant from a public body, it's European funding, it's central government, it's Welsh government, it's all public money. I think that we have to bear that in mind, because yes, this is innovative. We kind of understand why it hasn't got anywhere, but I want us to always remember that this is public money. I've owned my own company. I did research and development. If something didn't work, I would get tax allowances for a following year. That doesn't happen in this line of work. This is £3 million gone, all of which of £65,000 was public money. That's not pointing the finger at anybody for this failing, although I hold my concerns over the stumbling block that business rates have shown here. I just want us to always remember that, and if we are coming forward with the recommendations, that when we want to do good things, when we want to try and push the envelope, this is other people's money that we're using. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bledsoe. Councillor Graham Walter, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to pass on thanks to Janine and the other officers and professionals present for a concise report, which I think very well encapsulates the work that's been done via workshops, etc., to understand things that, to quote Councillor Bledsoe, lessons learned, things that could be done differently going forward if similar opportunities come up. But I would respectfully steer you back, Chair, to the fact that this is a report to describe the activity that was undertaken of what is now a closed scheme, and that we are simply being asked in the recommendation at the end to note the content of the report and provide comments. And I think we spent an hour doing that, and I propose that we move on. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, well, there's no other hands raised. Councillor, also, I do apologize. I'm going to give Councillor Pratt the last word on this, and if that's the feeling of the committee. He has his hand up before you came in, Graham. So I'm going to give Jonathan a chance to speak. Jonathan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I just run in a quick Google search. When it comes to R&D projects, the UK government spent £15.3 billion on these type of things in 2020. The Welsh government spends 1.7 billion on R&D, which will include these demonstrator projects. Now, I suppose if every single one of them failed, there would be questions. If every demonstrator project that BCBC involved itself in failed, there would be bigger questions. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't test things, you never know whether they work or not. So yeah, I do feel if you bear in mind the levels of zeros at the end of figures that are being spent in the UK, that 3 million is a loss. It's taxpayers' money, but I think it appears to me that it's money well spent on what has become ultimately a failed project, but with a lot of valuable lessons that we've taken from it. So I think we can put that £3 million in context over what happens across the UK as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. There's no further indication, so I will ask. What am I? 4, 5. If there are no further questions, I would thank the invitees. You may leave the meeting if that's your wish.
Many thanks, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
We give it a good
Thank you,
airing,
Chair.
I think, didn't we? Yeah, thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, everybody.
Alistair's gone. Okay. Item 5, conclusions and recommendations. I can ask Scrutiny Officer to summarise the key points, and the committee we will then make our conclusions and recommendations on this topic, please. Meryl, to Janine. Sorry, Janine. Lucy, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. So there has been lots of discussion today. I'll just run through some key points and then open it back up to the committee. So there was lots of discussion on the grant spend and what that money was spent on. Janine did, the corporate director did offer for her team to come back to the committee with where the money was drawn down to give members a better understanding in more detail. There was discussion around the interactive map and what set Cairo apart. There was also lots of discussion on business rates. there was Councillor Colin Davis brought up moving forward and the publicity, how to make sure lessons are learned and available, and perhaps more consideration to be developed. Sorry, Chair, bear with me. So useful, possibly useful to see more built in on the report to keep up to date with other local authorities. I think linking in with the toolkit could be built on by others, so that there would be a library information. I believe this was mentioned by the gentleman from Maple Cone. Again, there's more discussion on the business rate, different way to look at the project. I think that's everything from me, Chair, unless any of the members have anything they'd like to add.
Councillor Martin Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. The one thing that hasn't been mentioned there, and perhaps I didn't articulate it properly because I was trying not to express a view. But no, joking aside, as you know, in full council, from time to time, particularly when we have the capital programme comes up, I tend to make comment about the robustness of how we manage our programmes and our projects. And it's not just to be awkward, it's because I feel we have a weakness in that area. And I feel we also have an opportunity to strengthen, let's be positive, how we manage R&D projects. This is an R&D project, and I'm not, if we're going to do this sort of thing, and I hope we do, I hope we carry on, that we need to have some better process around that, and you know, the management of finances, the proper gateway protocols, you know, go, no go, you know, and the rest of it. For all I know, £3 million could be good value, but I don't know that it's good value, and I don't think the public will think it's good value. And so we need to have, in my mind, as a recommendation, some, if we're going to do R&D, some proper investigation as to what's good and what our processes should be to manage it. Because there's, you know, £3 million a big R&D project, and you know, I can't get away from that. But I want the positive. I want, and the question what I did ask and it wasn't answered was, forget Kyra Minewater for a second. What are we going to learn about doing R&D projects? And that's a recommendation I'd like to put forward. And then I'd know if it was value for money or not, wouldn't I? You know.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Martin. Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Chair. And trying to build on that with something positive that can go back from the committee is I kind of share the sentiment of the term lessons will be learned. And I'm trying to look at this from the view of the public that we're elected to represent. And whilst I can take on board Councillor Pratt's research on how much is spent across the United Kingdom, and you know, this is small amounts based on that, it is still public money. And you know, we talk about aspects like Maesteg Town Hall and what lessons will we learn from that. We talk about aspects about Arbed and what lessons will be learned from that. We talk about this new scheme and what lessons will be learned from that. This all comes down to costing money when we are cutting, and we are giving people less and less and less. We are required to manage this money. And I'm also a big fan of research and development. Without it, you don't move forward. But I don't want this almost, well, it's £3 million, it's come from here, and lessons. What definitively are the lessons that we have learned from this? Because that's not in the report. We'll say we'll learn lessons, but what specifically are the lessons we have learned that's cost £3 million of public money that we can move forward and represent our residents? Because whatever it was, John, I can't remember, 150 billion or whatever it was. I don't want to get caught in that trap. This is this specific case that we're looking at, and we need to go, you know, knocking doors, talking to our residents, and justifying that we've been their voice in this meeting. You know, what has that money goes on, and what specifically have we learnt? Because if there isn't anything, then we don't have the key element of R&D, which is how we do things differently. What we're going to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bledsoe. Councillor Colin Davis, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think, though, in terms of, tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought the report actually said or asked for a view on how we take things forward. So in other words, they have learned the lessons, and one of the questions that's come out of that is, do we, in the future, do we maintain projects like this in-house, or do we, instead of doing that, do we instantly go out and look for experts in the public or private sector? Now, in this particular project, it looks like the team they created to manage it was quite comprehensive in terms of, universities. I said British Coal was actually the coal authority, and hopefully the Welsh Government in terms of experts on how the coal field works geologically. So tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that was one of the requests from officers asking this committee for a view on how we take things forward in the future. So they're not ignoring that. They're specifically saying to us, what do you think? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jonathan Pratt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to put a point of clarity. I don't want anyone to just aimlessly throw money away. You know what I mean? And we are, rightly or wrongly, we're in the crisis financially that we are in. But it is something that frustrates me as a politician, that when something fails, automatically someone will jump out and go, could have spent that better, or should have spent it on the NHS, or why haven't you spent it on schools, and this sort of thing. But if we don't look at research and development, we don't look at, if this project was successful, whether it would have produced cheaper electricity. I'm not saying the residents of Cairo would be laughing at the moment, but it would, hopefully the idea is this would be a cheaper source of electricity. So like Muggins down here in Porthcawl, who's now paying through the grid, Cairo would have had a separate system. So it is we've got to keep moving forward and looking at things and understand that sometimes these things fail and sometimes they're successful. They have been successful in other areas. It's maybe if they pick the site in Blaengarrow, this would have been successful rather than Cairo. But as I understand, this map has come after the point, not before. So it's we've got to keep looking. We've got to be cost effective. We've got to be responsible with the money that the public give us, regardless of where it comes from, UK government, Welsh government, our own income. But I think we'd be failing as a society if we don't keep looking forward for new innovative projects. And sometimes that is just a cost of things. And we've got to keep moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pratt. Councillor Nora Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think if you sort of ask the man in the street about this project, I think that the first thing they would say is it was a total waste of money. And what I do find frustrating, very, very frustrating, is that the lessons will be learned. How many times do we switch on the TV and somebody says lessons will be learned and things still happen, the same things still happen? I don't know how many times lessons will be learned. It hasn't been mentioned today. So I think it is essential that we understand what those lessons were that were learned. So,
Okay.
I think that should be one of the recommendations, is even if we just get it in an email, is to understand what lessons have been learned. And, with the Arbed fiasco as well, Cairo has had its fair share of wasted money, quite honestly.
Yeah. It's a similar request to Councillor Bledsoe there, isn't it? About the what are the lessons and all, isn't it? That's what
Well, yes.
Councillor Davis didn't agree, but there's 2-1 there. But anyway, we've got Councillor Graham Walton next, please. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Just to try and bring us back to recommendations, we're on conclusions and recommendations.
That's right.
It might be that my sense of what everybody is saying is that we make a recommendation that amongst the lessons at 3.4 and 3.5, we should add something along the lines of due consideration to the financial risks, constraints and pressures should be given to each and every similar type of project. Something along those lines, form of words along those lines. And then, as I said earlier, I really do think we need to move on.
Okay. Councillor Melanie Evans, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I've heard the debate thoroughly, and I will concur with Councillor Graham Walter. We do need to move on, but I just want it to be recognised that this was a demonstrator project, and I'm all for innovation. And just remember that BCBC have built a toolkit from their lessons learnt to share with others. And therefore, you know, I think it's all about finding out who will use that toolkit. How has it worked for them? Those are the lessons learnt that we can keep involved with those authorities that are utilising the toolkit that was built from BCBC, from lessons learnt.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to Melanie or Lucy? Have we got, I got Councillor Jenkins now. Councillor Jenkins, please. Trying to move on, you mind to warn you, Philip.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've just come back onto Melba there, right? 99% of it, as I said in the beginning of my opening speech, we could have found out on the internet, right? It's there. All the information is available. And any project, occur with the others as well, any projects going forward, there should be a thorough evaluation of seeing, even if looking to see before we even start a viability process on it. That's all. I'd like to say.
Okay, okay. Yeah, we're gonna move it on now. Lucy, have we got anything put together on that now on these comments we made? What we get an agreement here? What we're gonna recommend and conclude?
If you're happy for me to do so, Chair, I'll get something together and then send it round to the committee if that's okay.
Yeah, is that okay? Are we happy with that? Okay. We just finished item 5 now, and item 6 is this note. It says for noting this Q3 performance. Now, if we're not going to note this and just move on, I'm going to have to call a break here because we're going to go on way past 5:30 otherwise. So, do you want me to call a break now and come back to this, or would you like me to? Yeah, we'll have 10 minutes now, and then we come back just in case this does develop into something that you know it's not, you know, because it is safe for noting. But I'm sure people will want to ask the questions. Councillor Williams, quickly, please. You're on mute, Councillor Williams.
I'll take my leave of you now then, Chair, because it's going to be past 5:30.
Yeah, not going to be. Yeah, it's going to be past 5:30. No problem, Ian. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending. Okay,
yes,
we've got a 10-minute break now. It's 17:22 by my clock. I don't know if that's what everyone's in agreement with that. We call it 32 then, coming back just after our pass. Quick cup of tea. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Thank you.